Chapter 1. The Crown's Cold Decree. The child had been crying for 3 hours. Evangeline pressed her palm against the nursery door, willing her daughter to find peace, knowing she could not enter. Not yet. Not until the council had finished their deliberations in the hall below, deliberations that would decide whether her infant daughter lived or burned. She had been a fool to think the glamour would hold. The marriage contract had been clear. Lord Thaddeus Vallemont, vampire king of the northern bloodline, would take a human bride to satisfy the treaty between their worlds. She would live in his estate. She would bear his name. She would ask nothing of him. For 2 years, Evangeline had honored every word. She had walked his shadowed halls alone. She had dined in silence while he attended to his coven's endless politics. She had slept in chambers 3 corridors away from his own, the distance between them as vast as the chasm between mortality and eternity. He had never touched her, never spoken to her beyond formal pleasantries. And then, one night, she had been foolish enough to attend the blood moon masque. The memory shimmered like a half-remembered dream, wine darker than rubies, music that moved through her bones, and a stranger in a silver mask who had danced with her until dawn. His hands had been cold, his voice had been velvet. He had whispered things that made her forget she was a treaty bride, forgotten and unloved. She had woken in her own bed with no memory of how she'd returned, only the ghost of his touch on her skin and a single black rose on her pillow. 9 months later, she had delivered a daughter with pale skin, dark curls, and eyes that flickered red when she cried. Now the council wanted the child dead. Lady Vallemont. Evangeline turned sharply. Thaddeus stood at the end of the corridor, still as a monument, his expression carved from ice. He wore black as he always did, his coat tailored to perfection, his silver hair tied back in a manner that made him look both ancient and ageless. He was beautiful in the way winter was beautiful, cold, distant, killing. "They are waiting for you," he said quietly. "I will not bring her down there. They do not require her presence. Only yours." Evangeline's hands curled into fists at her sides. She is innocent. She is a complication. His pale eyes, gray as fog, sharp as steel, flicked toward the nursery door. The law is absolute. No human may bear a vampire child outside of sanctioned bloodlines. The penalty is death for both mother and infant. I am your wife. In name only. The words struck like a blade, clean and cold. "Then annul the marriage," Evangeline said, lifting her chin. "Let me take her and leave. You will be free of us both." For the first time, something moved behind his eyes, a flicker, swift and dark. "The council will not permit it. You know too much. You have lived among us." "Then what do you suggest, my lord?" Her voice broke despite her efforts. "That I watch them burn her?" Thaddeus stepped closer, and Evangeline forced herself not to retreat. He smelled of night air and old parchment, of something faintly metallic that made her pulse quicken against her will. He studied her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. "There is one possibility," he said at last. "But it requires your cooperation." "Anything." His jaw tightened. "Come." The council chamber was a cavern of stone and shadow, lit by candelabras that cast more darkness than light. 12 vampires sat in a semicircle, their faces pale and ageless, their eyes gleaming like predators disturbed at their feast. At the center stood Lady Seraphine, the bloodline matriarch, draped in crimson silk that pooled around her like spilled wine. "Lady Vallemont," she purred. "How kind of you to join us." Evangeline curtsied, her hands trembling. Thaddeus stood beside her, a pillar of cold silence. "The matter is simple," Seraphine continued. "You have borne a vampire child. Such a thing is impossible unless the father is of our kind. Yet you claim you do not know his identity." "I do not, my lady." How convenient? Seraphine's smile was a knife's edge. Tell me, does your husband know of your indiscretion? There was no indiscretion, Thaddeus said, his voice cutting through the room like frost. The child is mine. Silence fell, absolute and suffocating. Evangeline's head snapped toward him, but his expression betrayed nothing. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. Yours, Lord Valamont? You expect us to believe you consummated a marriage you have publicly ignored for 2 years? I expect you to honor my word as king. Your word is not law when it contradicts the evidence. Seraphine rose, gliding forward. The child bears the scent of bloodline magic, yes, but not yours. I can smell it on her. Whoever fathered that infant possessed power older than this coven. Thaddeus did not flinch. Then your senses deceive you. Do they? Seraphine stopped before Evangeline, tilting her head. Or perhaps, you deceive yourself, my lord. The matriarch's hand shot out, gripping Evangeline's wrist. Pain lanced up her arm, a burning, invasive coldness that made her gasp. Blood does not lie, Seraphine whispered. And then she released her, stepping back with an expression of dawning shock. Impossible, she breathed. Thaddeus moved between them with inhuman speed, his hand closing around Seraphine's throat. Do not touch my wife again. The room erupted in hisses and movement, but Seraphine raised a hand, halting them. Peace, my lord. She smiled slowly, dangerously. I see now. The blood moon mask. You wore the silver mask. Evangeline's breath stopped. Thaddeus's grip tightened. You overstep. Seraphine. Do I? The matriarch laughed, low and dark. Tell them, Thaddeus. Tell them the child is yours. He released her, his face a mask of barely contained fury. And when he spoke, his voice was raw, strained, as though the words cost him something vital. Tell them the child is mine. Seraphine's eyes glittered with triumph. As you wish, my king. The council will accept your claim. For now. She turned to the others. The matter is settled. The child lives. But as the vampires filed out, Seraphine paused beside Evangeline, her whisper cold against her ear. He does not remember, does he? How delicious. Blood magic is such a curious thing. Then she was gone, leaving only shadows and the terrible weight of revelation. Evangeline turned to Thaddeus, her voice barely a breath. Was it truly you? He did not answer. He only walked away, leaving her alone with the echo of a question that had no answer, and a child who bore the eyes of a stranger she had danced with in dreams. Chapter 2. The Unraveling Thread. Evangeline did not sleep. She sat in the nursery rocking chair as moonlight spilled through the mullioned windows, holding her daughter against her chest. The child, whom she had named Celeste in secret, slept peacefully now, her tiny hand curled against Evangeline's collarbone, red eyes hidden beneath delicate lids. Tell them the child is mine. Thaddeus's words circled through her mind like ravens, dark and persistent. The council had accepted his claim. Celeste was safe. But nothing else made sense. The stranger at the blood moon mask had been passionate, warm despite his cold hands, alive in a way Thaddeus had never been. He had laughed. He had pulled her into shadowed alcoves and whispered poetry against her throat. He had made her feel desired. Thaddeus had barely looked at her in 2 years. How could they be the same man? You should rest. Evangeline started, her arms tightening protectively around Celeste. Thaddeus stood in the doorway, half hidden in shadow. She had not heard him approach. She never did. I cannot, she said quietly. He stepped into the room, and for the first time she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were clenched at his sides as though he were restraining something dangerous. The council will not challenge my claim again, he said. She is safe. Why did you do it? The treaty. No. Evangeline stood, settling Celeste into her cradle before turning to face him fully. The treaty required you to marry me, not to claim another man's child as your own. You have risked your position, your reputation. Why? Thaddeus's jaw worked silently. In the moonlight he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. Because I have failed you enough already, he said at last. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Failed me? Evangeline whispered. You owe me nothing. Our marriage is a formality. You have said so yourself. I have said many things. His voice was rough, strained. Not all of them true. He moved to the window, staring out at the gardens below, wild roses and night-blooming jasmine, beauty grown savage in the darkness. I am not accustomed to humanity, he continued slowly, as though each word required careful extraction. When the treaty was signed, I believed distance would be kindness. That you would be happier left to your own pursuits rather than bound to a creature such as myself. You never asked what I wanted. No. He turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. I did not dare. Before Evangeline could respond, Celeste whimpered softly. Thaddeus's gaze snapped to the cradle, and for an instant, just an instant, his carefully controlled mask slipped. Longing. Raw and undeniable. May I? He asked quietly. Evangeline nodded, too surprised to speak. Thaddeus approached the cradle with the caution of a man approaching a holy relic. He looked down at the sleeping infant, and something shifted in his face, softened, broke open. She has your mouth, he murmured, your chin, and someone else's eyes. His hand hovered over Celeste's head, not quite touching, trembling slightly. Yes. Seraphine said you do not remember. Evangeline stepped closer, her heart hammering. The blood moon mask. She said you wore a silver mask. Thaddeus's hand fell away. I do not remember much of that night. How is that possible? Blood magic. The words were bitter. There are rituals, spells designed to suppress certain aspects of our nature. I have used them for decades, centuries. They allow control, clarity. His voice dropped. They also exact a price. What price? Loss. He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw centuries of weariness, memory, desire, everything that makes us dangerous, and everything that makes us alive. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. You suppressed yourself. To protect you. He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Instead, I created a monster. I don't understand. The spell fractures under strain. During the blood moon, when our power is strongest, the suppression breaks. What emerges is... He struggled for words. Everything I deny myself. Everything I have locked away. Evangeline's hand rose to her throat, where she could still feel the ghost of kisses. The man in the silver mask. I do not remember it, Thaddeus said quietly. But when I woke the next morning, I found this in my chambers. He reached into his coat and withdrew a silk ribbon. Midnight blue, delicate, unmistakably hers. She had worn it that night, threaded through her hair. I burned it, he continued. Or tried to. It would not catch flame. Blood magic had marked it. His fingers tightened around the ribbon. I knew then what I had done. But I did not know how to undo it. So you stayed away? I stayed away. Celeste stirred, her tiny hand reaching toward nothing. Without thinking, Evangeline lifted her from the cradle, cradling her close. Thaddeus watched with an expression of such naked hunger that Evangeline nearly stepped back. She is yours, Evangeline whispered. Isn't she? Truly yours? I do not know. The confession seemed to cost him. The magic complicates everything. Bloodline recognition is absolute. She carries vampire essence, but whether that essence is mine or merely similar. He exhaled slowly. I do not know. Then why claim her? Because she is innocent. Because you are. He stopped, his composure fracturing. Because I could not watch them destroy you both for my failure. Evangeline stared at him. This ancient creature who wore loneliness like armor, who had locked away his own heart to spare her from it. You should have told me, she said softly. All of this. From the beginning. Would you have believed me? I don't know. She looked down at Celeste, at the child born from a night of magic and fractured memory. But I would have tried to understand. Thaddeus was silent for a long moment. Then, carefully, as though touching something infinitely fragile, he reached out and let his finger brush against Celeste's tiny palm. The infant's hand closed around his finger, and her eyes opened, burning red in the darkness, fixed on his face with impossible awareness. Thaddeus went absolutely still. Impossible, he breathed, because in that instant of contact, Evangeline saw it too. Recognition flowing between them like current through water, ancient and undeniable, blood calling to blood, father to daughter. The truth neither of them had been ready to face. Chapter 3. The Blood's Testimony. Thaddeus pulled his hand back as though burned, but Celeste's eyes followed him, crimson and aware, far too knowing for an infant of 3 months. This is not possible, he repeated, but his voice had lost its certainty. Evangeline's arms tightened around her daughter. What just happened? Bloodline recognition. Thaddeus stared at his hand, at the finger Celeste had gripped. It only occurs between direct progenitors and their offspring. It cannot be forged, cannot be faked. He looked up, his expression somewhere between wonder and devastation. She knows me. Then you are her father. The word seemed to shatter something in him. Truly. Not merely in claim, but in blood. Celeste made a soft sound, not quite a cry, more a coo of contentment, and her eyes drifted closed once more, the red fading to reveal dark irises beneath. Evangeline sank back into the rocking chair, her mind reeling. But you said you didn't remember. You said the magic. I know what I said. Thaddeus turned away, his hands bracing against the window frame. Outside, the night garden swayed in a wind Evangeline could not feel. But blood does not lie. Whatever happened during the blood moon, whatever I became when the suppression broke, it was still me. The man who danced with me, Evangeline said slowly, piecing it together, who spoke poetry and laughed and made me feel. She stopped, heat rising to her cheeks. Alive, Thaddeus finished quietly. Yes, that is what the breaking does. It restores everything I have spent centuries burying. He laughed bitterly. Passion, desire, need, all the things that make us monsters. You were not a monster that night. His shoulders tensed. Was I not? I seduced a woman who did not know my face. I took what was not freely given. I gave it freely. The words came out sharper than Evangeline intended, fueled by a sudden anger she had not known she possessed. I chose to dance with you. I chose to follow you into the gardens. I chose. She stopped, the memories flooding back with painful clarity. I chose all of it. Thaddeus turned slowly, his pale eyes searching her face. You did not know it was me. Would it have changed anything if I had? Evangeline met his gaze, refusing to look away. You have ignored me for 2 years, my lord, treated me as a stranger in your own home. And then, for one night, someone made me feel wanted, desired. Her voice dropped. Do you know what that gift meant? A lie, he said harshly, built on magic and suppressed need. Was it? Evangeline stood, still cradling Celeste against her shoulder. Or was it the truth you were too afraid to speak? The silence stretched between them, taut as a bowstring. Finally, Thaddeus moved. He crossed the nursery in 3 strides and stopped before her, close enough that she could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin, see the silver threading through his dark hair, count the centuries in his eyes. "I am afraid," he admitted, the words barely audible, terrified, "because when I look at you, I feel the breaking trying to happen again, the suppression fracturing, and I do not know if I can control what comes after." "Perhaps," Evangeline whispered, "you are not meant to." His hand rose, hesitant, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was ice against her flushed skin. "If I let myself feel," he said softly, "if I allow the breaking, I could hurt you, drain you, bind you to me in ways you cannot imagine or escape." "And if you don't?" Evangeline's free hand came up to cover his. "If you spend eternity locked away from everything that makes you more than stone, then I am safe. Then you are dead." The words hung between them like a funeral bell. Thaddeus's thumb traced the curve of her cheek, the gesture achingly tender. "I have been dead a very long time, Evangeline." "Then live," she breathed. "For her. For me. For yourself." For an instant, one perfect crystalline instant, she thought he would kiss her. Thought the distance between them would finally collapse. Instead, he stepped back, his hand falling away. "The council will not be satisfied with recognition alone," he said, his voice returning to its formal cadence. "Seraphine suspects the truth. She will push for verification." Evangeline's hope crumbled. What kind of verification? A blood right. Thaddeus moved back to the window, distance restored. "It requires a sample of the child's blood and mine. If the essence matches, the claim is irrefutable. And if she pushes for it, then I submit. And pray the ritual reveals what we both witnessed tonight." "What if it doesn't?" Fear crept into Evangeline's voice. "What if the magic obscures? Then I find another way to protect you both." He glanced back, and for a moment she saw the man behind the king, vulnerable, desperate, human despite his immortality. "I will not lose you, Evangeline, not again." Again. The word resonated strangely, as though it carried weight beyond this moment. But before Evangeline could question it, a knock sounded at the nursery door. "My lord." The voice was male, clipped with urgency. "The matriarch requests your presence. Immediately." Thaddeus's expression shuddered closed. "Tell her I will attend shortly." She said, "Immediately, my lord. The hunters have been sighted at the border." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Thaddeus went utterly still, a predator scenting danger. "How many?" "A dozen, led by Father Malachi." Evangeline's blood turned to ice. She knew that name. Every human in the border territories knew it. Father Malachi, the scourge of the bloodlines, who burned vampire covens and their human consorts without mercy. Thaddeus turned to her, his voice deadly calm. "Lock this door behind me. Let no one enter except myself or my personal guard." He paused at the threshold. "If I do not return by dawn, take the child and go through the passage behind the tapestry in my study. It leads to the old tunnels. Follow them east until you reach the forest shrine. Someone will meet you there." "Thaddeus." "Promise me, Evangeline." She clutched Celeste tighter, her heart hammering. "I promise." He nodded once, sharp and final. And then he was gone, leaving only the whisper of displaced air and the terrible certainty that everything was about to change. Chapter 4. The Hunter's Flame. Evangeline did not lock the door. Instead, she waited until Thaddeus's footsteps faded into the depths of the estate, then wrapped Celeste in a thick blanket and slipped into the corridor. If hunters had come, if Father Malachi himself had crossed the Valamont borders, She needed to know why. Needed to know if they had come for her daughter. The estate was a labyrinth of stone and shadow, but Evangeline had spent 2 years learning its secrets. She knew which passages the servants used, which staircases remained empty after midnight. She moved like a ghost through her husband's domain, silent and unseen. Voices echoed from the great hall below. "Violation of the covenant," a man's voice rang out sharp with righteous fury. "You harbor an abomination, Valamont, a human woman who has borne vampire spawn." "You will address me as lord or king," Thaddeus replied, his tone glacier cold. "And you will remember you stand in my hall by my mercy alone, priest." Evangeline crept to the gallery overlooking the hall. She pressed herself against the carved balustrade, peering through the stone filigree. Below, Thaddeus stood on the dais, flanked by 6 of his coven's warriors, pale, lethal figures in black. Facing them were 12 humans in the gray robes of the church's hunter division, each bearing silver weapons that gleamed like captured moonlight. At their center stood Father Malachi. He was younger than Evangeline had imagined, perhaps 40, with iron-gray hair and eyes like chipped flint. A silver cross hung against his chest, and his hands rested on the hilts of twin daggers at his belt. "The covenant is clear," Malachi continued. "No vampire shall create progeny through human vessels. The penalty is annihilation of the bloodline." "The child is mine by blood and right," Thaddeus said, "recognized by the coven. I have claimed her." "A convenient claim." Malachi stepped forward, his gaze sweeping the hall with predatory assessment. "Tell me, Lord Valamont, when did you develop a taste for your treaty bride? You who have publicly spurned her presence for 2 years?" Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. "My private affairs are not your concern." "They are when they violate divine law." Malachi's hand moved to his cross. "Produce the child. Let me see this supposed heir." "No." The word cut through the hall like a blade. Malachi smiled coldly. "Then you confirm my suspicion. The child is not yours. She is a bastard born of fornication. She is my daughter." The words exploded from Thaddeus with such force that the candles guttered. Power rippled outward from him in waves. Ancient, vast, barely contained. Several of the hunters stumbled back, their hands flying to their weapons. Only Malachi held his ground. "Prove it," he said softly. "Submit to the blood rite, here, now, before witnesses." Silence fell, absolute and suffocating. Seraphine materialized from the shadows at the hall's edge. She moved with serpentine grace, her crimson gown whispering against the stone. "An interesting proposal," she purred. "I confess I too would rest easier with such proof." Thaddeus's head snapped toward her. "You overreach, matriarch." "Do I?" Seraphine smiled. "Or do I merely seek to protect our bloodline from scandal? If the child is truly yours, the ritual will prove it. If not," she shrugged delicately, "then the hunters may have what they came for." Evangeline's arms tightened around Celeste, horror flooding through her. Seraphine was betraying them, offering her daughter to the church like a sacrificial lamb. "I will not subject an infant to that ritual," Thaddeus said flatly. "It is invasive and painful." "Then you refuse?" Malachi's hand closed around his dagger hilt. "By the authority of the covenant and the church, I declare this bloodline in violation. Surrender the child or face purification." "You would start a war over one infant?" "I would start a crusade to prevent abomination from spreading." Malachi drew his daggers, blessed silver that sang as it left the sheaths. "Your choice, vampire, the child or your coven burns." The warriors around Thaddeus tensed, ready to strike. The air crackled with impending violence, and then Evangeline stepped forward into the gallery's light. "Stop!" Every head turned toward her. Thaddeus's eyes widened with fury and fear. "Evangeline, get back!" No. She descended the stairs slowly, Celeste cradled against her chest. The hunters' gazes tracked her like wolves watching wounded prey. If you want verification, Father Malachi, then perform your ritual. But you will do it with my permission and my presence, not as an execution. You have no authority here, woman, Malachi said dismissively. I am Lady Valamont. I am this child's mother. And under the covenant, I have the right to defend her claim. Evangeline stopped 3 steps from the bottom, meeting the priest's cold stare. Or have you forgotten that human consorts retain legal standing? Malachi's jaw tightened. Very well, the blood right will proceed. But I warn you, when it reveals the truth of her parentage, I will show no mercy. Then you will be disappointed, Evangeline said, with more confidence than she felt. Seraphine glided forward, producing a silver chalice from the folds of her gown. The ritual is simple: 3 drops of the child's blood, 3 drops of the claimed father's. If the essence resonates, the bloodline is confirmed. And if it doesn't? Evangeline asked. Then the child is illegitimate, and the church's law applies. Seraphine's smile was poisonous. Shall we begin? Thaddeus moved to Evangeline's side, his presence a wall of cold fury. You should not have come down here, he murmured. I could not let them decide her fate without me. His hand brushed hers, brief, warm, despite his nature. Whatever happens, I will not let them take her. My lord. Seraphine extended the chalice. Your blood first. Thaddeus took a silver needle from her waiting hand. Without hesitation, he pricked his thumb, letting 3 drops fall into the chalice. The blood hit the silver with a hiss, steaming slightly, glowing with faint crimson light. Then Seraphine turned to Evangeline. The child. Evangeline's hands trembled as she unwrapped Celeste's tiny hand. The infant stirred, whimpering. I'm sorry, sweetling, Evangeline whispered. The needle pricked Celeste's finger. 1 drop, 2, 3, and the infant's cry split the hall like breaking glass. The blood drops fell into the chalice, and the world exploded into light. Crimson flame erupted from the chalice, roaring upward in a column of power that lit the hall brighter than day. The resonance was instantaneous, absolute. 2 bloodlines calling to each other with the force of an earthquake. The chalice shattered. Seraphine stumbled back with a cry. The hunters raised their arms against the blazing light. And in the center of it all, Thaddeus stood transfixed, staring at the dying flames with an expression of absolute shock. Impossible, Seraphine breathed. That level of resonance, that's not mere paternity, that's first-generation bonding, Thaddeus finished, his voice hollow. She is my blood, my true blood. Malachi's face twisted with fury. It proves nothing. Blood magic can forge false? No. Thaddeus's voice boomed through the hall, filled with power that made the stone itself tremble. I am Thaddeus Valamont, king of the northern bloodline, firstborn of the ancient coven, and that child is mine. The words rang with compulsion, with truth so absolute that even Malachi staggered. In Evangeline's arms, Celeste stopped crying and opened her eyes, burning crimson, fixed on her father with perfect, impossible love. Chapter 5. The Fractured Memory. The hunters left at dawn, their threats hollow in the face of irrefutable proof. Seraphine retreated to her quarters with uncharacteristic silence, her confidence shaken by the ritual's overwhelming response. The coven dispersed, murmuring among themselves, casting sidelong glances at their king and the human woman who had borne his heir. Evangeline stood in the great hall long after the last footsteps faded, Celeste sleeping peacefully in her arms, and watched Thaddeus stare at his hands as though they belonged to a stranger. First-generation bonding, she said quietly. What does that mean? It means... Thaddeus's voice was rough, strained. It means she is not merely my daughter. She is my sired blood, the equivalent of a turned vampire, but born rather than made. He looked up, his eyes haunted. It should be impossible. Vampires do not reproduce naturally. We create progeny through the turning ritual, not through... He gestured helplessly. Through conception. Yes. Evangeline moved closer, her footsteps echoing in the empty hall. But she exists. The blood proved it. The blood proved she carries my essence in its purest form. As though... Thaddeus struggled for words. As though I had given her my immortality willingly. Deliberately. The way an ancient would pass their power to a chosen heir. During the blood moon. It must have been. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. When the suppression broke, when I became, whatever I became, I must have done something. Performed some ritual, or, you loved me. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. Thaddeus went utterly motionless. What? That night. Evangeline's voice was soft but steady. The man in the silver mask. He did not simply seduce me. She searched for the right words, the memories crystallizing. He worshipped me. Every touch was reverent. Every kiss felt like a vow. She met his gaze. He told me I was his miracle, his salvation, his only warmth in an eternity of cold. Thaddeus's composure cracked. I do not remember. I know, but I do. Evangeline stepped closer still, until only a hand's breadth separated them. And I remember something else. At the very end, just before dawn, he removed his mask. He looked at me with your eyes, and he said, "When you wake, you will not remember this face, but I will remember yours for the rest of eternity." Evangeline, you knew? Her voice broke. Even then, beneath the magic, some part of you knew you would forget. So you made sure I wouldn't. Thaddeus closed his eyes, pain etching lines in his ageless face. If that is true, then I am a coward. Because I let myself forget, rather than face what I had done. What you had done? Evangeline shifted Celeste to one arm and reached out with her free hand, cupping his cold cheek. You gave me the only night of genuine love I have ever known. You gave me her. She glanced down at their sleeping daughter. How is that cowardice? Because I abandoned you both. His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his face. I felt the bond form. I must have. Suring creates a connection that cannot be severed. But I buried it so deeply beneath the suppression that I could pretend it didn't exist. Why? The question emerged as barely a whisper. Why would you bury something so precious? Because I am a monster, Thaddeus said simply. And monsters destroy what they love. Before Evangeline could respond, Celeste stirred. Her tiny hand reached toward Thaddeus, fingers grasping at air. She wants you, Evangeline said softly. I do not know how. Neither did I. Evangeline shifted the infant carefully into his arms. But you learn. Thaddeus held Celeste as though she were made of spun glass, his ancient hands trembling. The infant settled against his chest, her tiny body relaxing into his cold embrace. And for the first time since Evangeline had known him, Thaddeus smiled. It was tentative, fragile, but real. She is perfect, he breathed. She is ours. His gaze lifted to meet Evangeline's, and in his eyes she saw centuries of loneliness finally beginning to crack. I want to remember, he said quietly. That night. What I felt. What I said. All of it. His jaw clenched. But the suppression magic, it is woven too deeply. To break it would risk. Would risk what? Everything. Thaddeus looked down at Celeste, his expression tormented. The magic does not merely suppress desire, it contains rage, hunger, centuries of denied need. If I shatter the spell, I could lose myself entirely, become the monster in truth. Or, Evangeline said gently, you could become whole? You do not understand the danger? I understand that you have been half alive for so long you've forgotten what living feels like. Evangeline moved closer until she could feel the cold radiating from his skin. I understand that our daughter deserves a father who is more than stone and duty, and I understand that I did not fall in love with a mask in the darkness. I fell in love with you. Thaddeus stared at her, stunned. Evangeline, break the spell, she whispered. Let me see the man who gave me forever in a single night. If I hurt you, you won't. You cannot know that. No, Evangeline admitted. But I trust you. The man beneath the king. The one who claimed a child that could have destroyed his reputation. The one who stands here now, afraid of his own heart. Because he cares too much to risk mine. Thaddeus was silent for a long moment, Celeste sleeping peacefully between them. Then, slowly, he nodded. There is a ritual, he said quietly, ancient, dangerous. It requires... He hesitated. Blood exchange, yours and mine, willingly given. Evangeline's pulse quickened, but she did not look away. To break the suppression? To shatter it completely and to bind us, truly, forever. His voice dropped. If we do this, Evangeline, there is no undoing it. You will be mine in ways the treaty never imagined, and I will be yours in equal measure. Will you remember? Everything. Evangeline reached up and touched his face again, feeling the cold marble of his skin, seeing the desperate hope in his ancient eyes. Then let us remember together. Chapter 6. The Binding Dawn. They performed the ritual in Thaddeus's private study, away from the coven's prying eyes. Evangeline had settled Celeste in a makeshift cradle near the fire, a nest of blankets and soft cushions where the infant slept, oblivious to the magic about to reshape her parents' souls. The room was lined with books, dark wood shelves stretching to the vaulted ceiling, and a single window that overlooked the night gardens. Dawn was still hours away. Thaddeus had inscribed a circle on the floor in salt and silver dust, ancient symbols Evangeline did not recognize but could feel, a low hum in her bones, a pressure against her skin. Once we begin, he said, his back to her as he worked, the magic will pull at the suppression like a thread unraveling. It will not be gentle. What will happen to you? I do not know. He turned to face her, and vulnerability made him look younger, more human. The memories will return. Everything I denied, everything I buried. It may overwhelm me. I may... He stopped, swallowing hard. I may not be able to control what comes after. You mean the hunger? Yes. Evangeline had known this was coming. She had felt it in the way his gaze sometimes lingered on her throat, the way he stood too carefully distant, as though proximity itself were dangerous. I am not afraid, she said. You should be. Perhaps. She stepped into the circle, the symbols glowing faintly beneath her feet. But fear will not change what we are, what we have already become. Thaddeus moved to stand before her, so close she could see the silver threading through his dark lashes, the ancient sorrow etched in the lines of his face. Blood given freely, he murmured, binds soul to soul. What is mine becomes yours, what is yours becomes mine. There is no separation, no escape. Good, Evangeline whispered. I do not want escape. His hand rose, trembling, and cupped her cheek. You are so fragile. Then be gentle. Something flickered in his eyes, dark, hungry, desperate. I will try. He produced a small blade, silver and ceremonial, and drew it across his palm without hesitation. Blood welled up, darker than human blood, almost black in the candlelight. Then he offered the blade to Evangeline. She took it, the metal cold against her fingers, and pressed the edge to her own palm. The sting was sharp, bright, grounding. Their blood mingled as they clasped hands, his fingers closing around hers. The circle erupted into light. Power surged through Evangeline like lightning, cold and vast and ancient, filling her veins with ice. She gasped, her knees buckling, but Thaddeus held her upright, his other arm wrapping around her waist. "Stay with me," he commanded, his voice layered with compulsion. And then, the memories hit. The blood moon mask, music swirling through marble halls, and Thaddeus. No, not Thaddeus. Something darker, wilder, free, pulling her into his arms. "You are exquisite," he murmured against her ear, and she had laughed, dizzy with wine and desire. They danced for hours. He touched her as though she were sacred, kissed her as though she were salvation. And later, in the gardens beneath the crimson moon, he had removed his mask and looked at her with eyes full of wonder and despair. "I will not remember this," he whispered, "but I want you to know, if I could choose my eternity, it would begin and end with you." She had kissed him then, and he had lowered her into the soft grass, his hands reverent and desperate. And when he entered her, she felt something shift, a binding deeper than flesh, a connection that sank into her very soul. He had marked her, claimed her, made her his in the oldest, most primal way, and she had given herself utterly, knowing it was the only night they would ever have. Evangeline gasped as the vision released her. Thaddeus was staring at her with wide, shocked eyes, his careful control shattered. "I remember," he breathed. "Evangeline, I remember everything." "So do I," she whispered. His hand tightened around hers, blood still flowing between them. "I loved you even then. Before I knew how to say it, before I understood what it meant. And now? Now." His voice broke. "Now I love you so deeply it terrifies me." The circle's light flared brighter, magic spiraling around them like a living thing. Evangeline felt her humanity yielding, bending, reshaping itself to accommodate something vast and immortal. The bond was forming, soul entwining with soul. "Thaddeus," she gasped, "what is happening to me?" "The binding." His arms locked around her, holding her against his chest. "Your mortal essence is merging with my immortal one. You will not become vampire, not fully, but you will be bound to me. My life will sustain yours. My power will protect you." "Will I age?" "Slowly, very slowly. You will have centuries with me, not decades." Centuries. The word should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like salvation. The magic surged one final time, and Evangeline felt something snap into place, a golden thread connecting her heart to his, unbreakable and eternal. The light faded, the circle's symbols dimmed, and Thaddeus collapsed to his knees, taking her with him, burying his face against her throat. "Forgive me," he whispered raggedly, "for abandoning you, for denying what you were to me, for every cold word and distant glance. Forgive me." Evangeline's hands tangled in his hair, holding him close. "There is nothing to forgive. There is everything. No." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes, no longer cold, no longer distant, but burning with centuries of denied emotion. "We were both prisoners, you of your magic, me of my uncertainty. But we are free now." Thaddeus stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. Then, slowly, reverently, he lifted her bound hand to his lips and kissed her bloodied palm. "I am yours," he breathed against her skin, "in this life and whatever comes after. I am wholly, irrevocably yours. And I am yours." He kissed her then, deep, desperate, claiming, and Evangeline tasted forever on his lips, cold and perfect and hers. Behind them, Celeste stirred in her cradle, making a soft sound of contentment. as though she too felt the bond complete, as though their broken family had finally become whole. Chapter 7. The Coven's Judgment. They did not leave the study until midday. Evangeline woke wrapped in Thaddeus's coat, her head pillowed on his chest, his arms locked around her with possessive tenderness. The binding had left her drained but whole, every nerve singing with awareness of him, his presence, his heartbeat, slow, ancient, steady, the way his fingers traced absent patterns against her spine, even in sleep. Celeste had woken once during the night, and Thaddeus had risen to tend to her, murmuring soft words in a language Evangeline did not know. Watching him cradle their daughter with such careful devotion had made her heart ache with too much feeling. Now, in the gray afternoon light, reality crept back in. "The coven will have felt the binding," Thaddeus said quietly, his voice rumbling beneath her ear. "Seraphine especially. She is sensitive to shifts in bloodline magic. Will they challenge it? They will try." His arms tightened fractionally. "But the bond is absolute. They cannot break what has been sealed by blood and consent." Evangeline lifted her head to look at him. In daylight, he was still impossibly beautiful, pale as carved ice, ageless, perfect. But now she could see the softness in his eyes, the vulnerability he no longer tried to hide. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we face them together." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "No more distance. No more pretending you are merely a treaty obligation. You are my wife, my bondmate, the mother of my heir." His expression hardened. "And anyone who threatens you will learn why I am king." A knock sounded at the study door, sharp, impatient. "My lord." Seraphine's voice dripped with false sweetness. "The council requests your presence. Immediately." Thaddeus's jaw tightened, but he called back calmly, "I will attend within the hour." "The council is already assembled. They are concerned about the magical surge last night. Then they may continue to be concerned until I am ready." Silence. Then coldly, "As you wish, my lord." Her footsteps retreated, but the threat lingered. Evangeline sat up, pulling Thaddeus's coat tighter around herself. "She is going to make this difficult. Seraphine has made everything difficult since the day she lost her bid for matriarch to my mother, 3 centuries ago." Thaddeus rose, moving to the window. Outside, the gardens were gray beneath overcast skies. "She sees you as weakness. Proof that I have abandoned our ways for human sentiment. Have you?" He glanced back, one eyebrow raised. "Abandoned our ways? Yes. For human sentiment?" A faint smile touched his lips. "No. For love. There is a difference." Evangeline's heart stuttered. He said it so easily now, as though 2 years of silence had never existed. "I love you too," she said softly. His smile deepened, warming the cold edges of his face. "I know. I can feel it. Through the bond." She could feel him too, she realized. A constant, steady presence at the edge of her consciousness. Calm, protective. Hers. "Come," Thaddeus said, extending his hand. "Let us face the coven, together." The council chamber was packed. Not just the 12 council members, but dozens of lesser vampires, courtiers, warriors, bloodline representatives. They lined the walls in silent judgment, their pale faces turned toward the dais, where Seraphine held court like a crimson-draped spider. Evangeline walked at Thaddeus's side, her hand firmly clasped in his, Celeste sleeping in a sling against her chest. She wore a simple black gown, her hair unbound, and met every stare with quiet dignity. Let them look. Let them judge. She was done hiding. "Lord Valamont," Seraphine began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You have performed a soul binding without council approval, without consulting the bloodline matriarch, without..." I require no approval to bind myself to my own wife, Thaddeus interrupted, his tone sharp as shattered ice. The law is clear. A vampire of sufficient rank may choose their bondmate freely. The law also requires the bondmate to be of appropriate standing. She is human. She is the mother of my sired heir. That grants her standing beyond any in this room save myself. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. The child's status remains disputed. The child's status was confirmed by blood right before witnesses, including a church hunter. Thaddeus's power filled the room, pressing down like a weight. Do you call me liar, matriarch? I call you impulsive? Seraphine rose, gliding forward. You have bound yourself to a mortal woman, given her access to your immortal essence, made her effectively immortal. She stopped before them, her gaze raking over Evangeline with open disdain. What happens when she tires of you? When human fickleness turns her heart elsewhere? That is not your concern. It is when her betrayal could destabilize the entire bloodline. Seraphine leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You have made yourself vulnerable, Thaddeus. Weak. And weakness invites challengers. Then let them come. Thaddeus's hand moved to Evangeline's waist, drawing her against his side. I am not afraid. Perhaps you should be. The temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the stone floor. And from the back of the chamber a figure stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair and eyes like drowning pools. I challenge your right to rule, the figure said calmly, by law of blood and strength. Your binding to a human has compromised your judgment and weakened your claim to the throne. Thaddeus went utterly still. Casimir. Brother. The vampire smiled without warmth. It has been a long time. Evangeline's breath caught. She had not known Thaddeus had a brother. He had never mentioned family beyond his long-dead parents. You have no grounds for challenge, Thaddeus said coldly. I am firstborn. The bloodline is mine by right of succession. Succession assumes the heir is fit to rule. Casimir moved closer, his movements predatory. But you have abandoned our ways, bound yourself to mortality, sired a half-breed child. His gaze flicked to Celeste, and something ugly moved in his expression. You are no longer worthy. Thaddeus's power exploded outward, shattering 2 of the candelabras. You will not speak of my daughter. I will speak as I please, unless you intend to silence me. Casimir spread his arms. Then accept my challenge, brother. Prove you are still strong enough to lead. Or step aside, and let those with clearer vision take the throne. The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices raised in argument, some supporting Casimir, others defending Thaddeus. And through it all, Seraphine smiled. Because she had orchestrated this, Evangeline was certain of it. The matriarch had brought Casimir here, fed his ambitions, lit the fuse, and now everything hung in the balance. Thaddeus looked down at Evangeline, and she saw the conflict in his eyes, the need to fight, warring with the need to protect. Do it, she whispered. Defend us. I am not afraid. His hand cupped her face, tender despite the violence brewing around them. You are remarkable. I am yours. He kissed her, brief, fierce, claiming, then turned to face his brother. I accept your challenge, Thaddeus said, his voice ringing through the sudden silence. Name your terms. Casimir's smile was a blade. Trial by combat. Tomorrow at moonrise. The winner takes the throne. And the loser? Exiled. Forever. Thaddeus nodded once, sharp and final. Agreed. Chapter 8. The Blood Remembers. Evangeline did not sleep that night. She sat in the window seat of Thaddeus's private chambers, Celeste drowsing in her lap, and watched her husband prepare for war. He had dismissed the servants, preferring solitude as he cleaned and sharpened weapons that gleamed like captured starlight. silver daggers, an ancient sword with runes carved into the blade, gauntlets that looked as though they had been forged in an age before memory. "Tell me about Casimir," Evangeline said quietly, Thaddeus's hand stilled on the whetstone. "What do you wish to know?" "Why he hates you." A long silence. Then, "Because I was born first. Because our father chose me. Because—" Thaddeus set down the blade, his jaw tight. "Because I exiled him 200 years ago for attempting to overthrow the coven. And Seraphine allowed him to return?" "Seraphine invited him to return." Bitterness laced his words. "She must have. He could not have crossed our borders without her permission." "Then this was planned. All of it. The council's questions, the hunter's visit." "A trap," Thaddeus agreed. "Designed to make me appear weak. Compromised." He turned to face her, his expression raw. "And in truth, I am. Because for the first time in 5 centuries, I have something worth protecting beyond the coven itself." Evangeline's throat tightened. "Us. You and Celeste, yes. If I lose tomorrow—" He crossed to her, kneeling before the window seat so they were eye level. "If I lose, Casimir will not honor the binding. He will attempt to break it. To take you as his own prize or destroy you to eliminate any competing claim. Then you cannot lose." "I am ancient," Thaddeus said quietly, "but Casimir is stronger, faster. He has spent centuries honing himself for this moment while I have buried myself in politics and suppression." His hand came up to cradle Celeste's tiny head. "I am afraid, Evangeline, truly afraid. Because this time, losing means losing everything." Evangeline set Celeste carefully in her cradle, then turned back and cupped Thaddeus's face between her hands. "You are not the same vampire you were 2 days ago," she said firmly. "The suppression is broken. Your power is whole. And you are not fighting for pride or tradition." She leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "You are fighting for love. That makes you stronger than he could ever be. I pray you are right. I am." She kissed him, slow and deep, pouring everything she felt through the bond, faith, love, absolute certainty. "You will win, and we will spend centuries together. I have seen it." He pulled back, eyes searching hers. "Seen it? In the binding, when our souls merged?" Evangeline smiled slightly. "I saw glimpses, fragments of possible futures. And in every single one where I was happy, you were there. Alive, victorious." Something shifted in his expression, hope breaking through despair like sunrise through storm clouds. "Then I will make that future real," he whispered. "I swear it." Moonrise came too quickly. The combat would take place in the old courtyard, a circular arena of ancient stone that had witnessed countless duels over the centuries. The entire coven had assembled, packed into the galleries and balconies overlooking the space, their pale faces hungry for bloodshed. Evangeline stood at the edge of the circle, Celeste in her arms, flanked by 2 of Thaddeus's most loyal guards. Seraphine watched from her place of honor, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. Casimir entered from the eastern gate, stripped to the waist, his body a map of scars and old violence. He carried no weapons. His claws would be weapon enough. Thaddeus entered from the west, fully clothed, his ancient sword at his hip. He looked calm, controlled, but Evangeline could feel the tension through the bond, coiled anticipation, fierce determination. Their eyes met across the arena. Thaddeus inclined his head slightly. "I love you," she sent through the bond. "And I you," he returned. "Always." Then the matriarch raised her hand. "Let the trial begin." They came together like colliding storms. Casimir moved with inhuman speed, his claws extended, aiming for Thaddeus's throat. But Thaddeus was faster. Centuries of suppressed power now flowing freely, no longer chained. He ducked beneath the strike and drove his fist into Casimir's ribs with bone-shattering force. The crack echoed through the courtyard. Casimir snarled, spinning, his legs sweeping out. Thaddeus leaped back, his coat billowing, and drew his sword in one fluid motion. "You have grown soft, brother," Casimir hissed, circling, "dulled by your human pet. And you have grown arrogant." Thaddeus's voice was cold, absolute, mistaking isolation for strength. They clashed again, steel against claw, ancient power against raw brutality. The courtyard shook with the force of their battle, cracks spiderwebbing through the stone. Evangeline watched, her heart in her throat, feeling every blow through the bond, the sharp pain when Casimir's claws raked across Thaddeus's shoulder, the grim satisfaction when Thaddeus's blade found flesh. But Casimir was relentless. He fought like a creature with nothing to lose, driving Thaddeus back step by step, blow by blow. "You were always father's favorite," Casimir spat, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, "always chosen, always elevated, while I was forgotten, cast aside." "You were cast aside for treachery," Thaddeus countered, his breathing ragged. "For attempting to murder your own blood. Because you did not deserve what you had?" Casimir lunged faster than thought, and his claws sank into Thaddeus's chest. Evangeline screamed. The bond flared with agony so intense she nearly collapsed. The guards caught her, holding her upright as Thaddeus staggered. Blood, impossibly dark, almost black, pouring from the wound. "Thaddeus!" she cried. He turned his head toward her, his face pale, and smiled, sad, gentle, loving. "Do not fear," he sent through the bond. "This is not how we end." Then he moved. Faster than Casimir could react, Thaddeus dropped his sword and seized his brother's wrist. Power erupted from him, the full force of his ancient bloodline, no longer suppressed, no longer chained, and Casimir's scream tore through the night. "You wanted my throne?" Thaddeus whispered, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "Then feel what it means to be king." He drove his free hand into Casimir's chest and ripped out his heart. The organ pulsed once in Thaddeus's palm, dark and dying. Then it crumbled to ash. Casimir collapsed, his body withering, aging centuries in seconds, until nothing remained but dust and memory. Thaddeus stood alone in the center of the courtyard, covered in blood, victorious. And Evangeline ran to him. Chapter 9. The Throne Secured. Evangeline reached him as he collapsed. She caught him as best she could, this ancient, powerful creature who had just torn out his own brother's heart to protect her. They sank together onto the blood-stained stones, and she cradled his head in her lap, her hands pressing against the wound in his chest. "Stay with me," she commanded, echoing his words from the binding ritual. "Stay with me, Thaddeus." His eyes fluttered open, pale gray, exhausted, but alive. "I told you," he murmured. "This is not how we end." Relief flooded through her so powerfully she could barely breathe. "You stubborn, reckless." He laughed weakly. "I learned from the best." The Coven's healers rushed forward, ancient vampires with knowledge of blood magic and flesh weaving. They descended on Thaddeus with swift efficiency, their hands glowing with crimson light as they worked to seal the wounds. Seraphine approached slowly, her expression unreadable. "An impressive display, my lord," she said coolly, though unnecessarily dramatic. "Casimir gave me little choice." Thaddeus struggled to sit up, gasping as the healers protested. "He came here with your blessing, matriarch. Do not pretend ignorance." "I merely extended an invitation to a bloodline member to return home. What he chose to do with that invitation was his own decision. You orchestrated this entire situation, the challenge, the timing, all to undermine my authority." Seraphine's smile was thin, dangerous. "Your authority undermined itself the moment you bound yourself to a mortal. I merely highlighted the consequences." Then let me be clear. Thaddeus rose to his feet, shrugging off the healers, his wound still bleeding but his voice absolutely steady. I am king by blood, by right, and by strength. I have proven this tonight, and I am bound to this woman by choice, by magic, and by love. Anyone who challenges either of those facts will face the same fate as my brother. The courtyard fell silent. Furthermore, Thaddeus continued, his power filling the space until the very air trembled. Evangeline is no longer merely my bondmate. As of tonight, I name her queen of the northern bloodline. She will rule at my side, with equal authority and equal voice in all coven matters. Gasps rippled through the assembled vampires. Seraphine's composure finally cracked, fury flashing across her face. You cannot. I can. I have. And any who dispute this will answer to me personally. Thaddeus extended his hand to Evangeline. My queen, join me. Evangeline's heart hammered as she stood, still holding Celeste in one arm. She took Thaddeus's hand, and together they faced the coven. I know I am not one of you, she said, her voice carrying despite her fear. I am mortal, human, fragile by your standards, but I am also the mother of the heir to this bloodline, and I love your king with everything I am. She lifted her chin. I will serve this coven faithfully. I will protect its people, and I will stand beside Thaddeus for however many centuries we are granted. This I vow. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from the back of the crowd, one vampire knelt, then another, and another. Like a wave, the entire coven sank to their knees, warriors, courtiers, even the council members. Only Seraphine remained standing, her face a mask of cold fury. You make a mistake, she hissed. Both of you. This will not stand. Then leave. Thaddeus's voice was arctic. Take your dissent and your schemes elsewhere, matriarch. You are no longer welcome in my court. You would exile me? I, who have served this bloodline for 5 centuries? I would exile anyone who threatens my family, you included. He stepped forward, and Seraphine actually retreated. You have 1 hour to gather your things and leave Valamont lands. If you are found here after moonset, you will be destroyed, permanently. Seraphine's eyes blazed with hatred, but she was not foolish enough to challenge him now, not after what they had all just witnessed. This is not over, she said softly. One day, you will regret this choice. Perhaps, but it will not be today. The matriarch turned and swept from the courtyard, her crimson gown trailing behind her like blood. And Thaddeus sagged against Evangeline, his strength finally failing. I have you, she whispered, supporting his weight. We will get you inside. You need to feed, to heal. I need you, he murmured against her hair. Only you. The guards helped them back to the private chambers, and the healers worked through the night to close the wound Casimir had inflicted. By dawn, Thaddeus was stable, pale and weak, but alive. Evangeline sat beside his bed, Celeste sleeping in her cradle nearby, and held his hand as the sun rose beyond the heavy curtains. You called me your queen, she said softly. I did. His thumb traced circles against her palm. Because that is what you are. What you have always been, since the moment I saw you at our wedding and knew I could never be worthy of you. You are worthy of everything. I am a monster who has lived too long and seen too much darkness. You are a man who loves fiercely and fights harder. Evangeline leaned down and kissed his forehead. You are my husband, my bondmate, my king, and I am so very proud of you. Thaddeus's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion pulling him under, but she felt his emotions through the bond, relief, love, bone-deep peace. For the first time in centuries, he was whole. For the first time in her life, so was she. Outside, the coven stirred with the news of their new queen. Some would resist, some would adapt. But they would all learn, eventually, that Thaddeus Valamont had not been weakened by love. He had been reborn by it, and nothing, not Seraphine's schemes, not ancient laws, not even immortality itself, would separate him from the family he had claimed as his own. Chapter 10. The Covenant Eternal. 3 months passed. Winter settled over Valamont lands like a blessing, soft and white and pure. The coven, under Evangeline's gentle guidance and Thaddeus's firm authority, began to change, slowly, carefully, but undeniably. Human servants were given better quarters, fair wages, the option to leave if they wished. Trade agreements were renegotiated with neighboring territories to benefit both vampire and mortal communities. The old laws, those built on fear and domination, were examined, revised, sometimes discarded entirely. It was not easy. There was resistance, murmurs of discontent from the older vampires who remembered the ancient ways. But Thaddeus stood firm, and Evangeline stood beside him, and gradually the coven adapted. Celeste grew with impossible speed, a trait of sired vampire children, the healers explained. At 3 months, she looked nearly 6 months old, her crimson eyes bright with intelligence, her tiny hands already reaching for her parents with deliberate intent. She would be extraordinary. They both knew it. Tonight, Evangeline stood in the nursery, watching snow fall beyond the windows while Celeste played with wooden blocks on the floor, stacking them with preternatural precision, then knocking them down with delighted laughter. "She has your determination," Thaddeus said from the doorway. Evangeline smiled without turning. "And your perfectionism. Look how carefully she arranges them." He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. Through the bond, she felt his contentment. Deep, genuine, permanent. "I received word from the Council of Bloodlines today," he murmured. "They have officially recognized our marriage and Celeste's legitimacy. No challenges remain. And Seraphine has established a new coven in the Southern Territories. She will cause us no further trouble." His arms tightened. "We are safe, Evangeline. All of us." She turned in his embrace, looking up into his beloved face, no longer cold, no longer distant, but warm with everything he had denied himself for so long. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "The binding? Naming me queen? All the changes?" "Every day," he said seriously. Her heart stuttered. Then he smiled. Genuine, radiant, devastating. "I regret that I did not do it sooner, that I wasted 2 years in fear when I could have had this. Had you." Relief and love flooded through her. "We have centuries ahead." "Yes." He kissed her forehead, her temple, the corner of her mouth. "Centuries to make up for lost time. Centuries to watch our daughter grow. Centuries to—" A knock interrupted them. One of the guards appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "My lord, my lady, you have visitors. They claim to be family." Thaddeus frowned. "I have no family. Casimir was the last. They bear the Valamont seal, sire, and they say they have information about your mother." Thaddeus went utterly still. "My mother has been dead for 300 years. "Yes, sire. They say they know how she truly died." Silence fell, heavy with implication. Thaddeus's mother, the previous queen, had supposedly died of a wasting illness, rare among vampires, but not unheard of. But there had always been whispers, questions left unanswered. "Show them to the receiving hall," Thaddeus said finally. "I will attend shortly." The guard bowed and withdrew. Evangeline touched her husband's arm. "Do you want me to come with you?" "Always." He cupped her face, his expression troubled. "But perhaps, keep Celeste here." Until we know what this is about. She nodded, understanding. Whatever revelations these visitors brought, they might not be suitable for their daughter's ears, enhanced though they were. They left Celeste in the care of her nursemaid and descended to the receiving hall together. Two figures waited there, a man and a woman, both vampires, both ancient by the weight of power that clung to them. They wore traveling cloaks dusted with snow, and their faces were eerily familiar. The woman had Thaddeus's eyes, the man had his proud bearing. "Hello, nephew," the woman said softly. Thaddeus staggered. "Aunt Morgana? But you disappeared after my mother's death. Everyone assumed that we had perished in grief?" The man, his uncle apparently, smiled sadly. "No, we went searching for truth, and we found it." He glanced at Evangeline, his expression approving. "But first, introduce us to your queen. Your mother would have liked her, I think." Thaddeus recovered his composure with visible effort. "Evangeline, these are my mother's siblings, Morgana and Victor Ashenheart. I thought them long dead." "We are difficult to kill," Morgana said dryly. Then, to Evangeline, "You have done well, child. He looks more alive than he has in centuries." Evangeline curtsied, uncertain how to respond to that. "Thank you, my lady." "Now then." Victor produced a rolled parchment from his cloak. "The truth your father tried to bury. Your mother did not die of illness, Thaddeus. She was poisoned, slowly, carefully, over the course of months." The hall went cold. Thaddeus's power flared, fracturing the marble beneath their feet. "Who?" The single word was a death sentence waiting to happen. "Seraphine," Morgana said quietly. "With your father's knowledge, if not his direct participation. They wanted the throne united under the old ways. Your mother's progressive ideas threatened that vision." "And you have proof?" Victor handed him the parchment. "Testimony from the healer who administered the poison, thinking it was medicine. Correspondence between Seraphine and your father. Bank records showing payment for silence." His voice hardened. "Everything you need to call for her execution under bloodline law." Thaddeus unrolled the parchment with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the contents. Evangeline felt his fury through the bond, volcanic, barely contained. "She has evaded justice for 3 centuries, he said softly, dangerously. "No longer." "There is more," Morgana added. "We believe Casimir's return was not merely about ambition. Seraphine promised him the truth about his mother's death if he succeeded in taking the throne. She has been manipulating your family for generations, Thaddeus, turning brother against brother, father against son. Then we end it." Thaddeus looked at Evangeline, and she saw the king in full. Ancient, powerful, absolutely certain. "We call a great council, present the evidence, and we demand justice." "It will mean war," Victor warned. "Seraphine has allies. The Southern Coven will rise in her defense." "Then let them rise." Thaddeus's hand found Evangeline's, their fingers intertwining. "I have something worth fighting for now. Something worth protecting at any cost." Morgana smiled, sharp, approving. "Your mother said the same thing once, before they silenced her." She bowed deeply. "We stand with you, nephew, as we should have stood with her." "Thank you." Thaddeus straightened, purpose replacing shock. "We will need your testimony, your evidence, and your loyalty." "You have it. All of it." As the planning began, as war drums started their distant thunder, Evangeline felt the bond thrumming with determination. Thaddeus's and her own merged, inseparable. They had found each other against impossible odds, had built a family from secrecy and magic, had claimed a throne together. Now they would defend it, together. Always together. and in the nursery above, Celeste played with her blocks, unaware that her parents were about to reshape the vampire world forever. Unaware that she, born of a blood moon and binding magic, child of love and sacrifice, was the future they were fighting for. The future that would dawn, no matter how dark the night became. Chapter 11. The Blood Moon Rises Again. 5 years later. The Great Council had met. The evidence had been presented. And Seraphine had burned. Not easily. She had fought with 3 centuries of cunning and power behind her, rallying her allies, attempting to paint Thaddeus as a traitor to vampire traditions. But the proof had been irrefutable, the testimony damning. Even her most loyal supporters had been forced to acknowledge the truth. She had murdered a queen, had manipulated bloodlines for generations, had nearly destroyed the Valamont legacy entirely. The council had voted for execution. Unanimous. Thaddeus had lit the pyre himself. And when the flames finally died, leaving only ash and memory, the vampire world had changed forever. The old guard, those who clung to the ancient brutal ways, had lost their champion, and in the vacuum, something new had begun to grow. Peace, tentative, fragile, but real. Now, 5 years later, Evangeline stood on the balcony of their private chambers and watched the blood moon rise over Valamont lands. It hung enormous and crimson in the sky, exactly as it had the night Celeste was conceived. But this time, there was no fear. No suppression magic. No secrets. Only anticipation. "Mama, look!" Celeste ran onto the balcony, her dark curls flying, her red eyes bright with excitement. At 5 years old, she looked nearly 10. Tall for her age, graceful, impossibly aware. "Papa says tonight is special, that the moon will sing." Evangeline smiled, scooping her daughter into her arms despite her size. "The moon always sings, sweetling. You just have to know how to listen. Will you teach me?" "Of course." Evangeline kissed her forehead. "But first, your father has something to show us." As if summoned by her words, Thaddeus appeared in the doorway. He wore simple black, his silver hair unbound, and he looked exactly as he had the night they married. Beautiful, ancient, untouchable. Except now, when he looked at Evangeline, his eyes were warm. "Ready?" he asked softly. "For what?" "You will see." He extended his hand to Celeste. "Come, little one, let us show your mother what we have been planning." Celeste squealed with delight and leaped from Evangeline's arms, running to take her father's hand. Together, the 3 of them descended through the estate, moving deeper and deeper until they reached the old gardens, the wild, overgrown section where Evangeline had first been seduced under a crimson moon. But the gardens were not wild anymore. Someone, Thaddeus, she realized, had transformed them. Stone paths wound through carefully tended roses. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting soft golden light. And at the center, where she remembered falling into soft grass, there now stood a pavilion of white marble, open to the sky. "What is this?" Evangeline breathed. "An apology," Thaddeus said quietly, "and a promise. I cannot give you back the night we lost, the memories I did not keep. But I can give you this. Every blood moon, for the rest of our lives, I will dance with you here. No masks, no magic, no forgetting." Tears pricked Evangeline's eyes. "Thaddeus? Just you and me," he continued, his voice rough with emotion, "remembering where we began. Celebrating what we have become." Music drifted from somewhere, soft, ethereal, the same melody that had played at the Blood Moon Mask all those years ago. Celeste tugged on her father's hand. "Papa, you are supposed to ask her properly, like we practiced." Thaddeus laughed, that genuine, warm sound Evangeline had learned to cherish, and knelt before his daughter could scold him further. "Lady Evangeline Valamont," he said solemnly, extending his hand. Queen of my heart and my bloodline, would you do me the honor of this dance? Evangeline placed her hand in his, her heart so full it ached. Yes, always yes. He drew her into the pavilion and they began to dance, slowly, carefully, as though learning each other all over again. The blood moon watched from above, crimson and ancient, bearing witness. Do you regret it? Evangeline asked softly. Any of it? Which part? Marrying you? Claiming our daughter? Burning down 3 centuries of tradition to build something better? He smiled against her hair. No, I regret only the time I wasted being afraid. We have time now. Centuries of it. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. And I intend to fill every moment making you happy. You already do. Celeste watched from the edge of the pavilion, her expression dreamy. When I grow up, I want someone to look at me the way Papa looks at you. You will, Evangeline promised. Someone worthy of you. Someone brave, Thaddeus added. Because they will need to be, to approach the daughter of 2 monarchs. Celeste giggled, then grew serious. Papa, will I ever remember the night I was born? The magic that made me? Thaddeus considered this carefully. Perhaps, when you are older, when your power fully awakens. Blood memory is part of your heritage after all. Will it hurt? No, sweetling. It will feel like coming home. They danced until the moon reached its zenith, until the music faded and the lanterns burned low. And when they finally stopped, breathless and laughing, Thaddeus cupped Evangeline's face and kissed her. Deep, thorough, claiming. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I loved you in the darkness when I could not remember. I loved you in the silence when I could not speak. And I will love you in every life, every century, every moment until the stars themselves burn out. And I love you, Evangeline returned, in this life and whatever comes after. Forever. Celeste made a sound of exaggerated disgust. You are both being mushy again. They broke apart laughing, and Thaddeus scooped his daughter into his arms, spinning her until she shrieked with delight. And in that moment, with the blood moon shining, with her daughter's laughter ringing, with her husband's love wrapped around her like armor, Evangeline understood the truth she had learned across 5 years of struggle and triumph. Love was not a weakness. It was the strongest magic of all, the kind that could shatter curses, reshape kingdoms, and bind souls across eternity. The kind that made even monsters human again, the kind that would last forever.